We're here. We're going to talk. This is how I feel. We are going to talk about doing a leadership review for this year. We're doing this in 2022, but it could be a different year. The questions remain, the activities remain. Quick intro. I'm Ricky Goldenberg. I'm an executive leadership and career coach, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
And I am Justin Mulvaney, and I'm a leadership and performance coach, as well as a retreat and offsite facilitator.
You're a lot of things. We're a lot of things.
So many things.
Let's jump into this. So first of all, I think the agenda, the things that we're going to go through today, and we'll tell you now, this probably will take around, all told, for most folks, it takes about 90 minutes. So there's going to be times that you're going to stop the video, that you're going to go and do an activity on your own. But what we're going to be covering today is talking about, first, why do we even bother with a review? We're going to take you through our 5-step review process. We're going to start thinking about next year. In this context, it was 2023. In your context, wherever you are, it might be a different year. And we're going to talk about completing and closing out the year that you're in. Anything to add, Justin?
Nada.
I love it. Okay, so why bother with a review? One of the things that we talk about a lot is when we are more senior, we basically just don't have time to pause and reflect. You know, we're in so much of execution mode. There's a big effort to ensure that we're completing things, that we're thinking about our metrics, that we're thinking about our team performance, that we don't have a lot of opportunity to stop, pause, and reflect. And the problem is that because we're doing that, we're jumping forward, we're continuing to move, we kind of fall into autopilot. We sort of assume I'm good, I'm fine, I'm still going, and that is quote unquote enough. I actually don't have time to think about anything else. I'm so focused on putting out fires. And that's a problem because ultimately without an annual leadership review, we run into a couple specific issues. One is that you're in autopilot, you're basically maintaining that status quo for better or worse. You also are not taking time to think about not just your business, which you probably are doing. You probably are taking time to think about our business. We're not taking time to think about how you as a leader can improve within your organization. And that also demonstrates to your team that you don't put an effort on that you don't put a focus on this, that it's not something that you need to work on. And in fact, that's a detriment to your team as well, because it demonstrates, why should we work on self-growth? Why should we keep pushing ourselves if we also have a leader who's not doing it themselves, who's not open to feedback and constructive criticism, who's not pushing themselves forward? But if you're with a leadership review, what I love about that is you'll be clear on how you've performed this year, not your business, not your team, how you have performed. And you'll also get clear on how you want to show up, in this next year. What is that going to look like? How are you going to be a better version of yourself? And you're also showing to your team that it's like totally okay to keep growing. Actually, in fact, it makes you a better leader because you haven't decided that, oh, I figured it all out, I no longer need feedback. It's instead that we're continuously trying to improve.
Yeah. And in general, as leaders, as that locus of doing goes up, as demands mount, as we get more senior or we become founders, we necessarily, that there's a level of overwhelm that starts to set on where I'm sure all of you are familiar with this. There's just this feeling of I'm reacting all of the time. Mm-hmm. And the chance that an annual review provides is to slow down and look at, what are these habits? What are these patterns of reactivity that are going on here? What are they serving? What's happening that's going particularly well with this? What's happening that's not going particularly well? What do I want to change? What do I want to do better? But that all first starts by taking stock of, well, what the heck actually is going on here? Yeah.
I love that. And I also think the last time that we did this, we got feedback, oh, this is painless. I heard from someone else that this moves so quickly, you get so much done. And in some moments you're kind of in it and you're uncomfortable, and other moments you're back up on top and you're feeling comfortable. And so one of the things that really makes this approach unique is the idea that we're going to move quickly. This is not intended to be something, you know the answers to a lot of these questions. And so because of that, we can actually run through it. And you can start to see patterns emerge because you're playing and staying in that space. I think we should get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, the 5-step review process. Justin, I'll pass it to you to do step 1.
Yep. Beautiful. So we're going to start out the review of the year. Now, to caveat, this is you rating your leadership. So not your company, not your personal life. This is very specifically you as leader. How do you think you've done in the last year? And what we want to do is we want to get a shape, kind of like quantitatively, of how the year went. So what that looks like is we have 8 dimensions here to rate yourself on. A few caveats on rating. 10, as good as it gets. I literally couldn't imagine a better year. 1, as bad as it gets. I couldn't imagine a worse year. That train was off the tracks. The wheels were flying off. There was a horse loose in the main cabin. Like, terrible year. Ricky and I both hold true that 7 is a cop-out number. 7 is this middling number that really doesn't tell us much. It's not good. It's not bad. So if you notice a 7 coming up, is it an 8 or a 6? And no 6.9s or 7.1s. Pick. Is it a 6 or an 8? Was it not so good or was it good? Because 7 doesn't really tell us much. And one good knee jerk to check in on as you're going through this is, what might your team or the people around you rate you? And are your answers congruent with how you believe people are probably perceiving you? And so we'll go through these 8 dimensions and give yourself 5 minutes, give yourself a score, and then just 1 or 2 sentences of why. What went well? What didn't go so well? What are some gaps? What are your desires for it? And so the 8 categories here are going to be results and outcomes. This is hard results and outcomes. Did you as a leader and your team achieve what you wanted to achieve? Not did you do everything you could to get them, did you achieve them? 2, operations and execution. How did you execute against what you wanted to? Maybe you didn't get all of your outcomes, but it wasn't in your control and you executed incredibly. How are you as an operator? How was your process? 3 is communication. So how did you communicate as a leader? Did you communicate enough? Too much? Not enough? How was the tenor of your communication? Were you too hard? Were you too soft? 4 is delegation. How did you delegate? Did you delegate the things that you needed to? Did you delegate them to the right people, to people who it was in their strengths? Did you delegate away maybe the things you were good at that you shouldn't have delegated? How's your delegation for the year? 5 is creating and setting a vision. So how good were you at getting clear on a vision in here and then setting it outward so your team could orient against it? 6 is living the culture. So how did you as a leader live the culture that you want to see on your team and at your organization? Were you the culture standard that you wanted everybody to be? 7, people management. So this is specifically for us, not performance management. That's up in 1, 2, results, outcomes, operations, execution. This is, how are you at handling the soft stuff, the squishy stuff, the culture stuff, people's emotions, the relationship management, all that stuff. And then 8 is personal management. How good were you at managing you, at managing your emotions, your behaviors? A lot of leaders who are overwhelmed, if they're really honest in this category, that's not too high of a number. It's hard to be in a real leadership position and excel at personal management. It takes a lot of focus. So I'll invite you to take a couple minutes, fill it out, pause if you need to, and we'll hop on to the next one.
Awesome. Let's do it. If you need, you can pause the video, fill these out. I will say, if you do pause the video, set a timer. Don't let it just linger. Otherwise, suddenly you're going to be in a weird personal spiral of thoughts and feelings. And we're trying to keep you above that.
For this entire review should be blurts. Let it come out. Results and outcomes. I'm feeling a set of 7. Well, if it's a 7, choose
no
6
7.
or 8.
Get your 7 out of here.
Go, okay, I'm feeling a 6. Write down 6. Why is it a 6? Don't analyze. And actually, this will be a good point, I think, Ricky. We caveated when we did this in person. this is kicking off the process of review. You're probably doing this sometime before the end of the year. You might notice as the year goes over, that actually wasn't 8, and here's why. And so this is just your first shot in starting to surface and then connect all these things to see some of the themes and patterns. It's not about getting it perfect.
I love it. Okay, step 2, we're going to talk about highlights. So something that I really love in general is storytelling, right? I love thinking about these things in terms of the story, the experience, who was there, what was involved, what happened. And so what you're going to do is you're going to capture in just a few sentences some of your proudest achievements this past year as a leader. It's really important that you think about it as a leader, because sometimes you want to focus on, oh, I really nailed that presentation. Well, maybe you did in terms of communication or the way that you delegated the work leading up to the presentation, whatever it looks like. You're just going to write maybe 2 or 3 and be as specific as humanly possible. So pause the video, set a timer, literally maybe even 3 minutes before we get into step 3. Step 3. You can't talk about highlights without talking about lowlights. And also, I'll be honest, I think for a lot of people, we jump to the lowlights first. There's like a little bit in our brain that we're like, oh, this was a tough year. And so this is a great opportunity. No one is reading this. I'm not reading this. Justin's not reading this. You're not sending this to anybody unless you want to, which is your own prerogative. Do whatever you want. But ultimately, this is your own thing. You get to decide, stay in it. Write down what are the things that you are not proud of, that were not your best version of leadership. And again, be as specific as humanly possible. Set a timer, write them down, blurt them out.
Yeah. And for both of these 2 exercises, what I'll say is there's also, for highlights, as leaders, often there's a tendency to under-celebrate ourselves. So let yourself feel some of the joy, some of the pride, like let yourself feel the feelings that come with celebrating your highlights. And I notice with a lot of leaders, myself included, we tend to whip ourselves with the lowlights and carry them with us. And so I can find it useful in this exercise to treat it as kind of pulling these lowlights and all of the feelings that come with them. There may be some shame, some anger at yourself, some blame, some disgust, and letting yourself pull them out and clear those out. So you can start the new year light, not carrying that weight with you.
Yeah. I'm going to jump us to step 4. Pause the video if you need to write things, but then let's go.
Big learnings, seismic learnings. 2022, let's wrap it up. What are your biggest learnings or takeaways from the year? For a lot of leaders, myself, I'm this way. We can be analyzers and we can pull out a ton of learnings. I want you to focus on the 3 to 5 biggest learnings. What's the real low-hanging fruit, high leverage stuff for you? And the prompt I really want you to feel into is, these are the learnings that if you were to embody them, if you were to live them out going forward, it would be a seismic shift in how you lead and move through the world. And what I'll invite you into is some of these learnings you may already have coalesced throughout the year, and this is a chance to stamp them in and codify them. And some of them may be coalescing right now as you've rated your year and done highlights and lowlights. And so leave some space for new learnings to drop in, but don't go beyond 5. Maybe go 1 beyond 5, but if you start to go more than 1 beyond 5, you're probably getting a bit long. Focus on the ones with some oomph behind them.
I'll also say, I think there's a tendency that learnings have to be from a mistake. Learnings can also be from a win. Like we might discover that one of the highlights from this year is a learning about something that's really specific that you know that you want to keep working on, that you want to keep growing on. So often I think we tend towards a learning is like, I messed up and this is where I'm going to get better. It's also okay if I did this thing really well and I want to do more of that. I want to actually cultivate that further.
Yeah. Lean into that zone of genius.
5, the theme. Okay. If there was a theme for this past year and your leadership, what would it be? What's the word that comes out? Maybe it's 2 words. Keep it pithy, keep it tight. It's literally just like, what is the thing that comes up for you?
Yeah. What actually happened this last year? What's the theme of it?
You shouldn't even have to pause the video to think about it.
Just
Literally,
let
the
it out.
word is out.
Yep. Blurt it out.
Yes. That's it.
That's
Okay.
it.
We did it. Did 2022. We're going to switch into, we're going to talk about 2023. And then don't worry, we're going to complete and close out our year as well. So let's get straight into it. I think the thing, Justin and I are both coaches, which if you've worked with a coach in the past, you probably are aware of the fact that one of the big things around coaching is actually around action. It's actually around forward movement. There's an element of let's pause and reflect, let's learn, and let's also shift. And that shift can be tiny, that shift can be minuscule, but it's still forward movement. And so it's actually really difficult to talk about, okay, here's 2022 without at least thinking about, well, how are we going to apply these learnings in 2023? So we are going to apply these learnings in 2023 and think about what that should look like.
Okay, so 2023 is a leader. What are the 3 to 5 big things you want to accomplish in 2023? 3 to 5 big things, no more than that. What are the big goals that you want? And again, don't think too much about these. These should be like just your desires. What bubbles up for you? What would you like to have happen? And the bonus for these things is let yourself be clear on how you know you've met them. Right? One thing that we do as leaders is we constantly are raising our standards. We're constantly raising the bar. As a result, we never get to celebrate hitting those goals. And so make sure that the way you've defined these is if some stranger were to come in and you were to say, here's my goal, you could say, here's the evidence that I've met the goal or that I haven't. And they would go, yup. And you both could come to consensus. Push for that level of clarity around what it looks like, how you'll know that you've met that goal. Might be a metric, might be feedback from your team. Onward and upward.
Let's
Pause it if you need. Okay.
Justin, tell us about it.
Hit it. So look back at your ratings that you did for 2022. Thanks, Ricky. Return to that list of ratings, and I want you to look at them and think about 2023. And think about, of all of those ratings what ratings do you want to have a different value associated with them? And note, these ratings, they're just numbers. There's no good or bad, right? And so maybe you had something you rated a 3 last year, and again, you're like, I don't care for this to go up. Let it be a 3 again. That's great.
That's okay.
That's perfect, right? But look, what are the things that are really calling out to you to either improve or even, I think I overinvested here this year, and it would be okay if that went down. The invitation I'll have for you here too is there's a tendency, I see it in myself, to want everything to be a 10. Like, oh, I want to be a 10 out of 10 leader on all dimensions. Let yourself be realistic. Start where you are. What were your ratings for 2022? What are the most important categories to improve or let up on for you? Mm-hmm. And where realistically can you get them? And then if you're ambitious, go, if I were to stretch, where could I get there? Where could I get? Let yourself be ambitious. And then same as last time, get clear. How will I know? If I'm trying to take setting and creating a vision from a 3 to an 8, how will I know that I've hit an 8? And then once you have that for each of these categories that you want to change, choose one teeny tiny action step to kick it off. That action step might be, I'm going to text my co-founder, or I'm going to email my VP about this, or I'm going to set a meeting, or I'm going to start a document. But choose the first thing to just start the snowball rolling to getting that to change. It might just be telling somebody, hey, I rated myself at a 3 and I want it to be an 8 next year. Mm-hmm. So just an easy action step to start to get it moving.
I love it. Okay. Setting yourself up for success. So this is almost a vignette. When you think about yourself over this next year, what do you want your leadership to look like? How do you want your team, your partners, the people that you work with, how do you want them to describe your leadership in 2023? So we just did these big things that we want to think about. We have metrics and things around them. We have the ratings that we're looking for next year. And it's very, it can feel almost analytical. This is allowed to be a little softer. If someone said, oh man, I was working with Ricky this year and I just felt so cozy the whole time. Not saying that you're going to be a cozy leader. Maybe that's a goal of yours, but whatever it is, that's the vibe. We're looking for just how do you want it to look like? What is it going to feel like? The people that work with you. And then in addition, you're doing this right now with us, that you're taking time thinking about how did this year go? How do I want next year to go? How are you going to create the time, the space, the accountability to keep checking in on this and to hold this broader vision over the year? Some organizations, we only do annual reviews, but you forget everything from Q1. Some organizations, we do quarter by quarter, but you're so caught up in the quarter that you don't take your head out and you're looking at the whole year. So because of that, one of the things that we'd also invite you to think about is, how am I going to take time for myself to actually act on, review, reflect, think about how I am growing as a leader in this upcoming year? It could look different for everyone. It could be working with a coach, you got to plug it. It could be putting an event hold in your calendar. It could be creating a recurring meeting with a partner that the two of you sit down and do this together with accountability. Whatever it is, it's just making sure that you create that time and space to check in with yourself and ensure that you're sort of hitting whatever that cozy feel is. So take a moment, think about it, because you can. Maybe you'll even take action and put these things in your calendar as a reminder. You could do that. I wouldn't hate that. But otherwise, if you need it, pause it and write some stuff down. We got to do another theme. The theme. Okay. So we had a theme for how we felt about this past year. Now we're going to think about a theme for this upcoming year. What do you want that theme to be? Again, one word, blurt it out. It's the first one. You shouldn't even have to pause the video for 5 minutes unless you're like, I need a thesaurus because I want the perfect word, which I fully respect. All right. We did it.
We did it.
We did it. Now let's jump into, so we've taken time, we've reflected on this past year. I keep wanting to say the annual year, but we've reflected on this past year. We've really taken stock of what happened, how we've been feeling about it, the wins, the losses, the themes, the learnings. You've done a lot. We've thought about the next year and how we want to show up, where we want to grow, what we're going to do to make that happen. But something that really starts to sit on us is that there's a little bit of panic or weight that you're like, I have other stuff to do. I'm not done yet. And so this is a really beautiful opportunity to do a little bit of this. So Justin, I will pass it to you to talk about completing and closing out 2022.
Yeah. So completing and closing out 2022. The goal here is, oftentimes we've done all this reflection, we have all these intentions for the new year, but we have this like carryover from the prior year that's still open, and it muddies the water as we kick off in the new year. And so the goal that we have for here is like, let's take care of that carryover problem. Let's make it so you have a really clean foundation to spring off of in 2023, or whatever the next year is for whatever year you're doing this in. Ricky, if you want to hit the next slide for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a two-step process. We're going to dump all of that stuff out of your mind first, and then we're going to decide what to do with it. But what I want you to do, and we're going to walk you through a trigger list here, is I want you to think of everything that you can as we walk through this trigger list. Everything that you can think of, and I want you to write it down. Think of this as an audit or a purge. Analyze nothing. It shows up in your head. Just get it out onto the paper. And what this means is you might write something down that you have no intention to complete. And we'll discuss processing at the end. But right now, what the goal is to get all of this weight out of your head and onto a piece of paper. It's like, imagine you have your 27 tabs open in Chrome, and we're going to close all of those tabs out of your head by nailing those things down. And so this next section of the video will encourage you to do it live. It's probably going to take about 10 or 15 minutes to read through the entire trigger list. So just sit with it. We'll also hop to a slide at the end that has everything on it, so you can self-guide through that if you'd like. But let's go through. So again, mind dump, don't analyze. We'll talk about processing at the end. So triggers. First, think of any projects that you've started that aren't yet completed. So write down any projects you started that are not yet complete. Even if you intend to complete them before the year is over, even if they're supposed to roll over, just get every project you've started that's currently open onto the paper. And with that, what are any projects that you need to start? What are things that are not yet started, but in your head that you feel like you need to start? Are there any agreements or promises you've made that aren't fully completed? So this might be things you've made to your partners, your investors, employees, customers, vendors, fellow colleagues, but are there any agreements or promises you've made that you have not yet fulfilled? Along that vein, are there any communications you haven't made yet? Any communications that you need to send out, an email you need to send, a letter you need to send, a text you need to send, a Slack you need to send that you haven't yet? Or is there any communication that you're waiting to receive from others that you need to go get, or you need someone to send to you? Is there anything that you need to write? Are there any evaluations, reviews, any proposals? You need to write any content or articles? Any marketing content? Or even any internal content? Anything clarifying things about your organization or your organizational processes that need to go to your team or people around you? Do you have any meetings that you haven't yet scheduled but need to be had? Any important meetings? It could be internal, could be external, could be with yourself. Any meetings? Is there any reading or reviewing that needs to be done? This could be reports, industry articles, anything around performance reviews, anything on your to-read list that you haven't yet read.
That one stresses me the most out.
Anything dealing with financials for your business? Anything around forecasting, budgeting, balance sheets to review, investors, anything around accounts receivable or accounts payable? Do you need to pay somebody? Or does someone need to pay you? Anything in the domain of finance? Is there any planning or organizing for next year that you need to do? Are there any goals or targets you need to create for your company, yourself, or your team? Do you need to make any strategic plans or business plans? Do you have events that you need to plan, presentations you need to plan or schedule for, or any conferences or business travel that you need to book? So anything you need to do to plan or organize for the upcoming year. What about organizational development? Anything around job descriptions, new systems that you need to create or implement? Do you need to do any restructuring with the organization? Need to do anything around your offices or facilities? Anything around organization development and growing your org? Then administration. Is there anything around legal, insurance, personnel or staffing policies, compliance, anything you need to upgrade around your procedures or your training or onboarding? Anything at all around administration and administrative policy? Along those lines, anything around staffing? Do you do any hiring, any firing, any letting go? Or anything around reviewing, anything for team or company morale? Is there any feedback, positive or negative, that you need to give? Any compensation conversations that you need to have that you haven't had yet? Any difficult conversations you need to have? Are there any expectations that need to be reset? Any withholds that you need to share to clear with people around you? Or is there anything where you and a bunch of people are on the fence about that you need to have a hard conversation to make a decision? Here's a fun one. Your systems. There's all sorts of systems we're going to talk about, but you let yourself be really picky. Is there anything about your phone you want to change? Anything about your computer? Do you want a new computer? Do you want different tools for your computer? Do you want new software? And then look around your office setup. Maybe you have a home office, maybe you work in an office. But is there anything you want to change about your office equipment, your monitor, chair, the way you decorate the space around you, or anything, any supplies you need to buy, anything you need to change about your organization, the setup of your space? Give yourself some time on that one. Let yourself be picky. Next, sales and marketing. Anything you need to do for sales and marketing. Any marketing campaigns you need to run, cold calls you need to make, leads you need to push to a close, sales strategies you need to form. Anything around sales and marketing. And then waiting. Are you waiting for anything? Anything at all? Anything you notice is floating around that plane is, oh my God, I'm waiting for this from somebody else. I'm waiting for them to send me this. I'm waiting to receive this. I'm waiting for the market to do this. I'm waiting for a competitor to do this. Anything at all that you're finding yourself waiting for. I'm waiting for my boss. I'm waiting for my employee. Anything you're waiting for. Waiting to win the lottery. Any of those things. And then lastly, professional development. So are there any trainings you want to take? Any coaching you want? Is there anything you've been wanting to research that you feel like will be good for your career and your development? Or even do you want to update any of your professional personas, your website, a LinkedIn or a resume? Do you want to update anything that's going to help you with your professional development? Get it all down. Now that's the trigger list. So if Ricky, if you want to hop on to our next slide, we'll just sit here. And maybe that was enough time for you before. If so, great, we'll move right on. If not, let yourself pause and sit here. Notice, is there anything in these categories? Let yourself just get it all down. For some of you, this is going to be a really long list, a really long list. For some of you, might be a small list. You might feel like you're fairly complete on a lot of fronts. Neither is better than the other. Get it all out. And Ricky's about to tell you what you're going to do with it.
This is my favorite part. Okay. We got to clear some stuff. And we're going to use, I'm going to call them 4 Ds, which is do, defer, delegate, delete. Let me talk about them. Do is the stuff on that list that you're like, yeah, just do it. Let's go. I got to do that. I have to make that happen. Defer is something that you would like to do. It is important to you, but it's not something that we have to do right now. And that might be because we need more information. It might be because it's actually just the wrong time for it, or it could also be that we are needing to marinate on something. If it is helpful, for me, something that's really helpful on the defer category is I like to defer it to a date or for a time of year. That's just because otherwise it sits in my brain as a continued mental load in my to-do list. It actually doesn't shift off of my to-do list unless I say, hey, that's something that I want to do, but I don't want to do it until Q2. That helps me all of Q1. Anytime my brain is like, what about that thing? I can be like, shush brain, we're doing that in Q2. Delegate is basically when you have something on that plate that should get done, you aren't necessarily the person that has to do it, and might be someone else should be doing it. So we're going to delegate it. And delete or decline as well. I like that too. We don't need to do it. Oftentimes it's something, it's a matter of, it actually really isn't that important. We don't need to defer it to later. We don't need to actually delegate it. It's actually something that we just maybe even think that we should be doing, but don't need to be doing. And so you can delete it. You can delete it. You can, I also like saying, I'm going to decline that. No, thank you. A little no, thank you to it. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to take that through the whole list. If for you, we ran into this the last time that we were running this with folks. If for you, delete feels like the hardest one, then that's the one that you're going to try to get the most in. If you're like, delete stresses me out, then let's try to delete stuff. And if you're someone who's looking at this list of 300 things and trying to put do next to all of them, just like check in with yourself on that. It's probably impossible that you can do on all 300 things on your list. Also, if there's 300 things on your list, you definitely need to be leveraging delegate.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. You may also find categories other than delete are the uncomfortable category for you. And so notice the bucket here that you have the resistance to putting things in. Maybe I really don't want to defer things. Maybe really look for some things that should be deferred, or maybe I really don't want to delegate things. This is very common for leaders who are just starting to hit seniority. I need to do everything myself. I can't delegate. I don't know that I can trust. Find some of the things that you can put in the delegate column. And what I'll say is for this delete category, what delete means is I am consciously letting myself delete this from my brain, from even the need to think about it. And so give yourself that gift. When you put something in delete, let yourself go. Let yourself make the choice. I am not doing this, and I am not spending the energy to think on this any longer. Free up the energy that comes with that delete column. That delete column is, if you can't tell, I'm most passionate about the delete column. I've coached people exclusively on increasing their usage of the delete column.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of delegate.
That's another big one that you can exclusively coach.
I love delegate, especially if it's someone who's like, I'm the only one who can do it. It's only me. I love delegate because sometimes you realize, oh, I don't really need to hold all of the plates. I can actually pass a plate off. So that's it. We know how this.
One other note.
Oh,
briefly.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on those last two exercises, if you really like them, the excerpt for the getting complete in work is actually a partial excerpt from an exercise that the Conscious Leadership Group does. They have one for your entire life. And so this exercise, if you really want to be complete going into 2023 or whatever next year is, we can link to that in the information for the video, and you can go off and there's an hour-long guided tour for doing that for your entire life. So if you're feeling like you want to do a broader review, hop in there. And also those 4 Ds are from Get Things Done, which is a productivity system. And so if you really love that, go check out Get Things Done.
Amazing. We did it. We talked about this past year. We talked about this upcoming year. We thought about how to wrap up this year with some thoughtfulness. That's all we got.
Thanks for watching, and thanks for spending the time with us.
Yeah.